worked out amazingly, especially with, of course, one Stone Cold Steve Austin. But a lot of these guys we see now, people would probably, if you don't know this era, you'd probably look at it and go, hang on a minute, this is a decent roster, because most of the guys you'll probably see on this one are went on to do some big things. But at the time, it certainly wasn't like that at all. It didn't come across like that, and I'm pretty sure it wasn't like that. And you still didn't know if they could potentially get over to the point where they did. But yeah, I mean, just looking at that audience, Matt, it looks massive in that arena, I've got to say.
Yeah, it does. It seems bigger than the numbers suggest. Just looking around that arena, maybe it's the way it's spaced out and everything, but it does look huge.
Yeah, the shape of it, definitely. It was crazy, in fact. Just looking at attendance records, in fact, as I said earlier, I would definitely be looking at what we get. And just as I imagined, Royal Rumble 97, yes, is without foul one of the highest, Royal Rumble attendance. So, yeah, it did have something about it then. But obviously, I know that most of this going into it was trying to get Shawn Michaels. It was about him getting some redemption in this against, of course, Psycho Sid, who, just to give everybody a little bit of a run on the storyline that we'll probably get to later, is that, of course, that was Shawn Michaels who had lost the WWF title at Madison Square Garden against Sid, and the whole heart attack angle happened, Matt. I'm sure you remember that, with Jose Lothario being involved. And this was the sort of return match where it was sort of all about Shawn Michaels getting redemption, and it was another time where they wanted Shawn Michaels to be the lead guy, but it wasn't happening as well as it could have been, and it was definitely hard to from what I understood from all the interviews I've heard about the Royal Rumble 97, it was a very, very hard sell to get this in, for people to buy this pay-per-view, and also to fill out this audience. Hence why they sold the tickets so cheap towards the end, to max it out. But nonetheless, still impressive to get that many people in there to watch WWF in a time, as I said before, where they hadn't been in front of these massive audiences for quite some time. As we see, of course, one of our famous moves there, the figure four on Triple H himself. And
another thing I found interesting about Triple H at this time was his attire. I like the way that inside of his thighs he has a nice little quilted bit to place someone's head. He's not completely horrible. He'll make sure you're comfortable before he drives your face, Matt.
Yeah, totally. That's a good point. Yeah, his attire, his character, I kind of enjoyed it. I think he really suited it, and as you say, he played it really well. Of course, he would make a dramatic change towards the end of this year, but that was when things were all picking up. I have to say, Matt, that when we go back in this 20 back, series, that one of the things we'll probably see, Matt, is that 1997 was arguably one of the biggest transitions in a year of WWE, in terms of the way they went, their approach into the Attitude was all happening in this year. But if you look at it from here, and I know we're going to get to it, Survivor Series will be our final one at the end of the year, but it's such a big difference in the way they presentation was, because what we're seeing now, Matt, is almost like the back end of the sort of traditional WWF way of putting things together, and almost little bits coming out where we're seeing the Attitude come into it, but just little snippets. So it was an odd time. It was a really big transition year, and like I said, a lot of things unfortunately had to be somewhat sort of sacrificed to get over that hurdle. And to get that far, but it got there in the end, obviously. What are you making of this match so far, Matt, as an opener to a Royal Rumble?
I mean, I think it's been pretty decent, actually. I mean, I'm glad they had the sort of no disqualification stipulation to it. Sometimes that doesn't work out great, but this one I think is doing it a good job, because I guess at this point this year they'd seen them fight a lot in normal matches, so going one step further, put a little bit of the crowd on the edge of their seat at the beginning of the show, perhaps, get them into a little bit of a bloodlust. I know there's not been any blood, but still you get that whole kind of feel about let's get some action going. So yeah, I'm glad they started off that way, and also we've said many times that this sort of the Intercontinental belt shows the real workhorses of the company.
Yeah.
So they've put that on Triple H at this point, and we know now that he had the potential to carry that and go on for great things and had the longevity. But yeah, so I'm glad that they started it off that way, because getting the title on the line and everything, it does create a little bit of a buzz.
Yeah, absolutely. Well said. And like you say, this has been they've certainly used as much as they possibly can by using the no DQ match to try and make their match different, and it's what you want. I mean, the thing with the Royal Rumble match is people, arguably they watch it because it is the Royal Rumble match. It's the one match a year, even though nowadays, mate, you could argue that we kind of get it a few more times if you think about the Battle Royal at WrestleMania sometimes now. I know that the Battle Royal is, everybody in the ring at the same time, but it's not like there's even sort of 2.5 months between each other, and it's like, here we go again. It's like just maybe too often, and also I think the problem, the importance of it here, Matt, was massive. Like at this point, winning a Royal Rumble meant that you was going to be. All eyes were going to be on you towards the biggest show of the year. But I think nowadays, that's sort of changed now. Like there's so many other avenues you can take to get to that main event. And also, Matt, it's not like we just have one main event now. It's like we have 4 sometimes. So it gets tougher to sell the Royal Rumble as a majorly important show as it once was, which is unfortunate, but it seems to be what's happened to a lot of the WWE shows recently. Like the lack of importance has sort of gone because of the amount of sort of more opportunities that there are, and I'm not always sure that's a good thing or a bad thing. Like I know people will argue it's better to have more main events than just pin it all on one. But at the same time, the sort of idea that winning the Royal Rumble means as much as it did. Kind of goes out the window sometimes. It's not always especially in the last few years, it's not always sort of been the most deserving guy going on to a WrestleMania main event, and sometimes he's not even in the main event. So that's the other thing to it as well, because that was the big thing, wasn't it? You was in the main event at WrestleMania, but that's sort of changed now. You could be like. I mean, wasn't it one year the World Heavyweight title match was on first, so that's how much all that changed, wasn't it?
I mean, yeah, it was an excellent tool, and it seems to be that it used to place huge importance on creating a new star in the Royal Rumble.
Mm-hmm.
But as we saw the years go on and on, it was more about giving the more established stars the win at the Royal Rumble, and I didn't really like that so much. So that's what's good about these early ones, that you see a whole lot of careers being made this way. But it feels like a little bit like these days, the Money in the Bank has sort of damaged the Royal Rumble.
Sure, that's another thing.
You used to look at the Royal Rumble and think anybody could win it. You've got a 1 in 30 chance, and it could be someone new. And then they brought out Money in the Bank, and all of a sudden it was a 1 in 6 chance. And they were usually people that haven't held a title before, the heavyweight title. So I think that did a little bit of damage to the Rumble in general.
Yeah, and of course having 2 titles means that another guy can get there on another avenue. By either maybe having a tournament or a number 1 contenders match after. So it just takes off the that sort of specialness about it, which is slightly unfortunate. As we see Goldust taking a painful blow on the turnbuckle there. Referee,
clumsy ref slipping into the ropes.
Yeah. Referee Earl Hebner there. Very much a big part of WWF at this time, of course. See Triple H going up, and yeah, I've enjoyed this match so far. Like just watching these guys do their stuff. It's like almost like they want to prove and go out and show, you know, what they can actually do.
Yeah, I've been quite impressed by this, and also it's been a lot longer than I thought this was going to be.
Yeah, absolutely. Gold dust there, that massive splash to the floor. Didn't look comfortable doing that. Not too many times you see him do that.
Intercontinental title, is that he's got in his hands?
Yeah, it is, yeah.
I was sure in the video when they showed us a minute ago that it had a white strap on it.
Right, yeah, unless he maybe changed it. Maybe that's when they changed it over then from the original one. Yeah, of course, which is sort of made back now.
We've seen a lot of titles come and go, but this Intercontinental title has always been there. Always been a constant, I think, of the company when you think of regards to titles.
Yeah. Well, they did scrap it, though, at one time, I remember, under Bischoff. I don't know if you remember that. It was like maybe a year or so. Yeah, I do remember it going out, which was very odd, because they was like, yeah, just one champion on one show. And then, you know, 3 months later, everyone on the roster's sitting there like, yeah, we got nothing to go for, because we can't get in the main event. So, you know, they ended up having to bring them back, both the Intercontinental and US.
I completely forgot about that. But that's like, sounds terrible, because the Intercontinental title is such an important title.
Yeah.
It's not about politics, it's about talent on that title.
Yeah. Well, there you go. Triple H winning with, of course, his finisher, the pedigree. And, yeah, I quite enjoyed that as a first kind of match. Like, for me, a Royal Rumble, it has to... Like I was saying earlier, I think the Royal Rumble is about the Royal Rumble match, but, you know, you need that little bit extra sometimes, Matt, where you need other matches to sort of build it up a bit. Like, I think it's too cheap for WWE to just go in and go, right, well, we're giving them a Royal Rumble. It only comes once a year, so we don't have to do too much else. So, you know, you do have to have, like, a decent title match with it, I think. But it's good to have some of these, you know, like we've just seen here, this good Intercontinental match. Because sometimes I've watched Royal Rumbles and they've literally done that. They've just put so much focus on the Rumble match that anything before it just seems ridiculous, just like trying to fill time sometimes. As we see, Goldust just sprawled out.
That was a pretty good match, I'd say, and yeah, I'm glad that was the one they chose to kick the show off, because oftentimes when they do a inconsequential match, like usually these days it would have been a tag team match, or they would have put on the cruiserweights or something when it really has no impact. But this, I think that was a good choice.
Yep. Well, now what was this little backstage here with Bret the Hitman Hart, who was a participant in this Royal Rumble, and of course he'd come off of he was currently in a feud with Stone Cold Steve Austin, Matt, that we know very well at this point. He'd wrestled him at Survivor Series in Madison Square Garden, and he'd beat him. As we now cut to Mankind, and this is what I'm saying, Matt. I mean, for a lot of people that didn't know '97 that well, they're probably looking at all these stars coming on, going, "Hang on a minute, this looks like a golden age." You know, what are we talking about? Like, why wasn't it more successful? But Mankind at this point, he hadn't been out that long as that character, believe it or not, when Mick came over from ECW, and of course Bret was arguably really established, no doubt about it. He'd had runs before that. He was a massive star, but you know, for a lot of these guys, they were still fresh, as we now see the Nation of Domination, Matt, with some rappers coming out. I remember this. Quite the entourage.
Cool entrance.
Yeah, quite the entourage here that we had with the Nation of Domination. So I remember these two guys coming out all the time. I used to be fascinated by this group. I used to this was one of my sort of favourites. I don't know why I was drawn to it, but I did like the idea of them, and I always thought, like, you know, why don't these guys ever try and go for the title? Like, they've got all these people behind them, like, they'd be a real force. But I mean, Ron Simmons, of course, was massive in WCW. You know, we know the history there. But when he come up to WWE, like, I know we spoke about this last time, Matt. You know, they changed the character. They called him Farouk, and they went a completely different way with him. But was you